And I find in it, by the time I got to November, my Jewish Canadian friends are reaching out to me, which I found, wow, like that's amazing because I had struggled to reach out. I thought I had a mix of like, what do I say to my Jewish friends?
Oh, so there
Do I
was a
say
barrier.
anything?
There was a barrier until November. You were not sure
I
what
think
to do.
both. Well, I started and then I felt.
Okay, so that was a very intense story, very also interesting, eye-opening, and now we have gone through the highly privileged origin, Palestinian origin
Yes. Oh my
story.
God.
I
Like,
mean, your family, despite of the trauma of the war, seems to have fared a lot better out of pure privilege, luck, and a lot of determination,
yeah.
as witnessed by, you know, insisting on high education for their children, trying to give better life for their kids and their grandkids. Now, I would like to jump into how the events of October the 7th affected you, and and how did the whole situation affect your life. And let's start by just a chronological order. What what did you know on October the 7th? What did you hear first, and how did you feel about it?
Okay. Well, thank you for asking. And first, I just want to acknowledge that October 7th, the terrorist attack, was just extremely painful for everybody. But I think probably started off by being, I'll just give you from my perspective, my chain of emotions and cascade. So, literally on October the 7th, I had opened my phone at 4 in the morning because my baby had woken up at 3 in the morning. And so I usually try not to open my phone when I put the baby down, but I thought I'll just check the time. And then I'm like, I'll just go on Instagram a little bit. And then you just start to see all the images of what happened. And honestly, I'm only speaking for myself, Ahmed. The first thought I had was why.
So
And
the
yeah,
sources of the first images you've seen were what? Because that made a big difference in people experiences. Because some people
yeah,
saw
I agree.
first images of glider pilots flying and bulldozers, and that did not look very negative for a lot of Arabs and Palestinians. You're breaking down walls, uh, but you knew there's violence coming after that.
Yes.
But then on the Jewish and Israeli side, there were images of elder people being kidnapped and civilians being killed. So which one of these ones you saw early? Because also most of them surfaced a day or two later. But like at that early
Yes.
stage, what were you seeing?
Yeah, no, I mean, the first one, the very, very first image I saw was the people on, yeah, the paraglider bike
Okay.
combo with the fan in the back and the bulldozer bulldozing the wall. Um, that was like the very first thing that I saw. So
Okay. So these were probably Arabic source media, just showing that stuff. Okay.
yes, yes. Um, it's impossible to see those images and not feel just a mix of all of the emotions because you know what's coming, you know what's going to happen, and you know what has happened, and you know it's just the tip of the iceberg. So I know I've heard other people say, you know, seeing the wall come down, you're very relieved to see the wall come down, and but at the same time, for me, I knew the wall was not coming down because of like diplomatic two-way negotiations
Because
and
we
still
ended the
choosing
conflict.
like, you know, people are like busting out, and we know, I feel like Gaza is, we call it, that's how we feel, this is our words, like we call it an open air prison. And so you see people bust out of prison. At the same time, you see people with guns, and you see people in groups, and you see shooting, and you see the death toll rising and not sure what's happening. So my first thought was, why, like, why this again? Like, we know what happens every time they do these operations. Why? Number one. Number two, civilians are going to get killed, and I don't agree with the killing of any civilians. Number three, I was just cringing, to be honest. I'm just going to be extremely open with you, and whoever on the internet doesn't like it, fine. But I was embarrassed and I was ashamed and I was scared. Because, I mean, yes, I know seeing people like running out of this wall, like the wall was open and they're running through, and you see civilians running through, and you see the look on their face because it's the first time they've been able to actually leave. That emotion, I think, is real. And I honor that, and I understand, or sorry, I would never understand. I've never been to Gaza. I would love to help. But I felt fear and embarrassment and shame and cringing because we know what the pattern is. And I think the fact that this seems to have been a large scale terrorist attack, you know that the retaliation is always going to be disproportionate response. So immediately I can't even
So
begin.
so let me stop you there. I want to go into that deeper. What was the pattern that you felt was going to be problematic, that you were worried about?
Obviously, every time Hamas throw rockets and kill civilians and kidnap people, we know that Israel will bomb Gaza and kill people, and it's always disproportionate response. Like their military policy is disproportionate response because they think it's a deterrent. But then I feel like it actually just creates more ideology that perpetuates.
Okay, so you were cringing, worried about what's going to happen.
And everything at the same time. Like,
Okay.
just, like, I don't agree with the killing of any civilians, regardless of
And
how they
it
were
and
born.
it didn't look like it was an organized military operation either. Like it looked like chaotic. And I think even Hamas themselves, they admitted in public statement that
Yeah.
things were more chaotic than what they ever planned. So it was
Yeah, it's
like,
cringy. It's the whole thing is cringe.
yeah,
It's cringe.
because
It's embarrassing. It's
then
terrible. It's
it,
shameful. It's
yeah.
disgusting. It's like
When you see
rude.
a mob going through, like you said, the wall, and they have no control, they have no leadership, and they're doing whatever they feel that they can do, and they're full of anger, then that's definitely something that is really
I mean,
scary.
I could never put myself in the shoes of somebody born in Gaza, and I would never, ever, ever dare to even compare my life to theirs because there's zero comparison. But you just know that they're just going to rain hell on the people.
Whatever they can reach.
Yeah, like the wall's not coming down by diplomatic two-way discussion. So obviously people are going to get shoved back into.
Okay.
It's just, it's so, and then I think so immediately
So
after that.
you were very early on realizing that something wrong is going to happen, is happening right now.
Yes.
And that's actually, you're better than me, because when I saw it first, I didn't jump into that conclusion, to be honest. I only realized it a couple of days later after I've seen the footage of what was going on. But you were kind of like early on realizing this is not going to be good. This is going to be wrong morally to do. Like it is not just wrong politically, it's wrong morally to do, and the repercussions of it will be worse.
Just the whole thing. And then, so I don't even have a chance to think. And then suddenly I find out that somebody who my family really loves and is close with was taken hostage by Hamas. So then suddenly my heart gets pulled into that
Someone
direction.
who is Palestinian or Israeli Jewish?
I want to protect their privacy because I
Okay.
didn't get their consent to talk about it, but I just wanted to address that there was somebody who I cared about very much that was taken hostage by Hamas. And so while I know I could have been born in Gaza if I didn't have some rich uncle pay a bribe for me to get out, for my grandparents to get out, because everybody walked south, right? Everyone from Yafa walked south. Not everybody. A lot of people did. But like, then I'm thinking about that person's mother, because I'm a mother. And then I'm thinking, all of these emotions are happening at the same time. And then from there, you have deep pain because I'm opening social media. I wish I didn't have social media, but at the same time, it's the only way that we're getting some of these images. I start to see messages from leaders around the world that, to my ears, sound like genocidal rhetoric. Like when people say finish them or give them hell. For me, I'm like, okay, I know carpet bombing of 2 million people is what they're talking about. And so when people say we have to eliminate Hamas, I understand that, how do you eliminate an idea, an ideology? Do you kill civilians to kill an ideology? I understand there are militants to address. At the same time, and this is going to sound maybe offensive to some people, the Hamas ideology is a similar thinking, from my humble opinion, of somebody in the southern United States that has their own guns. They have like all their guns because they're like, I don't trust my government to defend me. I have a right to defend myself. Like that, I'm just telling you from the Palestinian perspective, like the feelings. So I say, look, the Republicans that are saying, finish them, give them hell, I have to say, this is the same thinking as people that have machine guns in their homestead, because they, just in case. And then also, how would you feel if like a militia came and killed other civilians? But then when you say finish them, like who is the them that you're finishing when we know that there's going to be collateral damage? So when my ears heard all of this, I just felt like we are calling for killing of innocent people, because that's what happens every single time, Ahmed. That's what happens every time. We know this is what happens every time. So that's how painful it was. And then I also felt pressure. I felt peer pressure to post, to fight, to get involved. And then very quickly after that, it felt surreal, because then you still have to work, you still have to function. I'm still having to cook. I'm still having to care for other people. And so every day, like October 11, 12, 13, all the way to 31st, I felt like October was a disabling condition. It's a disabling experience to have feeling, mourning the deaths of thousands of children, mourning the deaths of tens of thousands of my countrymen and women, mourning all of that infrastructure being destroyed, universities. And then you suddenly have October 31st, Halloween. And then you start walking around and people are wearing costumes that are very triggering to me. Like people are dressed up in blood, and like somebody in my neighborhood put like, I'm sorry, trigger warning. They just put like all these baby dolls, and they like hung them from trees, like as decoration for Halloween. It was like so almost like impossible for me to leave the house and see this everywhere. And I was crying all the time, and people were like, why are you crying? I'm like, because these dolls that you're using to decorate your house remind me of the 140 newborn babies in the NICU that were born prematurely that we know cannot evacuate, and we know that their bodies decomposed because they could not evacuate. Like, this is just so much hurt and pain. I would never wish this. But at the same time, you feel guilt because you think, wait, who cares how I feel? Like, I'm fine. I'm in Canada. Like, why am I crying? I should be out trying to end this, end the killing, because they're actually living it. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a disabling condition. And I think the atmosphere of fear and expressing your opinion, it's very silencing. I mean, we know about the silencing that happens because I find, just speaking for myself, it's still difficult for me to talk about my own family's eyewitness experience. And I'm choosing every word carefully because I have been attacked for sharing my family's history. I have been attacked as somebody, just all sorts of negative words are used. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to express.
So there is a pressure, which I fully understand, and I think we all lived it. And the pressure is the bombardment we had of media. I think this was one of the worst covered events in history because it is covered in very gruesome details. And of course, people who post in media, they have very strong opinions and they post what serves their opinions. but there is serious emotional trauma coming out of that.
Yes.
And we have a situation now in Canada where the Arabic community, the Palestinians specifically, trauma has always been innocent people get killed and families leave their homes with their precious belongings on their backs. I mean, that's the historic trauma of the Nakba. And the Jewish Canadian community has the trauma of the Holocaust of just because you're Jewish, you're going to get killed. We're going to come to a neighborhood that is full of Jewish people and we're going to kill whoever we can and take the others into a death camp. And I think the two communities saw the sum of all their fears materialized live on air, broadcasted and rebroadcasted day in, day out on Twitter. And I think that creates a very tense environment. And you just want to fight. I know a lot of people fought internally inside the Arabic community on the internet just for daring to say, this is wrong, maybe we should do it. Like, people will fight very aggressively. And from what I hear from my friends in the Jewish community, the same thing is happening as well. If you step out of line and say this may be not right, it is very, very triggering response.
Yes, I've been the recipient of this many times, from strangers on the internet, from people that I know. Yeah, because I think in every time I would visit Palestine and Israel, because we always go everywhere. We go to Tel Aviv, we go to the beach, we go to Bethlehem, we go up, we go down, we go cross checkpoints, back, we go to Kalkilia, we go to the refugee camp, we see UNRWA warehouses, we come back, we go to the East Colony Hotel and have a little brunch, a little snack. Every time I went back to the land, more and more, my heart would start to prioritize tangible outcomes for my people over the intangible pieces of identity and history that we hold so dear. The symbolism that we have of our people is so powerful that it can swallow my identity. At the same time, I think I want an outcome for my people that includes clean water. And even before the war, that more than 50% of children in Gaza had suicidal thoughts and ideation because they live in an open air prison and they have no mobility, and all of the blockade, the air blockade, the land blockade, the sea blockade, fishermen not being able to fish past a certain point, otherwise they get shot and thrown off their boats, all of that. I'm I want my people to fish the best fish. And so I'm thinking, well, how logically are we going to obtain that outcome? Because every time that these rocket fire, killing civilian, suicide bombing operations happen, it doesn't logically lead to equal the outcome, the tangible outcome that I hope for my people. And I think for that, I am possibly seen as a traitor, possibly seen as a normalizer, but also possibly, I humbly believe, I think there's a lot of people who do believe in how we are thinking and just don't have the ability to come out of the closet publicly and saying, why do Arabs in Haifa have a different life from Arabs in Gaza? Why, truly why? And we have some very painful things to address and talk about. Very painful. We have to also look in the mirror as a people. We have to hold ourselves accountable. And it's painful because it's the ego. It's my family. You're talking about my family. You're talking about me. Are you insulting me? No, I'm not insulting you. I'm not insulting your family. But it feels like you're insulting your family.
But it's the history. I think I'm very familiar with the history effect on people and the story we tell ourselves. So it's all about stories, to be honest. And if you look at a poor child coming from Asia or Africa to Canada, and that kid is told by their parents, and they don't have much, and the parents will have to work very low income jobs. And they tell their kid, we brought you to the best place in the world, and now you have the opportunity to do all the things we could have never dreamt of. And that kid becomes a lawyer, a neurosurgeon, an engineer, very successful. But a similar kid that is born in Canada to a family that says, we are poor because the Europeans stole our land. We know how that ends. It ends with our Aboriginal population having the highest representation in prison, in drug addiction, in almost in numbers that are like incomprehensible. It's like almost 1 on 5 or 1 on 4, and it's the same child. You just tell them different stories. So if you grow up in Gaza being told you are in jail because there is a jailer that wants to control you, and you never hear directly from the jailer, you're only on the receiving side of bombs and rockets from that jailer, and you have somebody who's firing rockets at that jailer that you know nothing about. I mean, I can understand how that happens. I can understand why somebody would be mentally trapped in that space. It is important to be self-critical. Yeah, it is important to be self-critical. I am 100% with you. It is important to be self-critical and understand that organizations like Hamas does not hold the future of anyone. Just like the Bengavirs of Israel as well do not hold the future for everyone. Like these are the keys of the past. But I don't want to talk too much. I want to also continue to listen to you. So we're gonna go back into that. Now you have that pain, and that pain. Yes. What was your course of action? What did you decide? What did you do to handle that? How did you?
Yeah.
How did that translate into actions on the ground?
I definitely, first of all, it became a full-time job to do anything to stop the war, like emailing my MP, calling them, talking to people offline, engaging in social media. One of the things I will really say is I really do appreciate my Canadian allies who reached out to me in October, even because it was the darkest days.
Non-Arabs, non-Palestinians reaching out to you, that makes a big difference. Yeah. Always.
It does. And
always.
And I find by the time I got to November, my Jewish Canadian friends are reaching out to me, which I found, wow, like that's amazing, because I had struggled to reach out. I had a mix of like, what do I say to my Jewish friends?
Oh, so there was a barrier. Anything. There was a barrier until November. You were not sure what to do.
Both. Well, I started, and then I felt like I don't even know what to say. Like I could hear my Canadian allies saying to me, like, I have no words, I have a loss of words. And my brain thinking like, well, just say what you're seeing. Like, what do you mean you have loss of words? Just say, I'm sorry for all the children in Gaza that are dying. Like, just say that. And I'm like, I don't understand. But then when I wanted to talk to my Jewish friends, I was at a loss of words. Like, what do I see? Like, it's like this massive funeral. It is interesting. And so I struggled. Like, I was trying to like reach out to each person I knew, but it would take me time because I was like trying to formulate, like, what do I say? Do I apologize? Do I like, so that was all happening in November.
At that moment also, you're probably worried about the reaction because you're not sure if even your message would be received well.
I wasn't worried about your reaction because, to be honest, I actually, in 2021, when Hamas threw rockets as well, and it hit some Israeli civilians, I was reaching out proactively to my Jewish friends. Okay. So I remember that they had really, really actually appreciated that. And
so you established trust early.
It's not about establishing trust. Like, I just, like, these were people that I were doing business with, that were my friends, that were in my network, that I just realized, like, I know they have family in Israel. They're probably scared. And I think the right thing to do, and the Canadian thing to do, is to say, are your family okay? And I know you're doing kind of like that look, but it just...
No, you may think it's normal, but it is not. Like, I commend you on doing that, because I know a lot of Arabs and Jews who interact professionally with each other, and they talk about everything. But when it comes to anything that happens in Palestine or in Israel on the occupied territories or whatever, they avoid talking about it like the plague.
I
And
know.
this is why I said
Yes.
people don't have trust. They're afraid to talk.
Of course.
And and
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
and
I agree.
generally when people talk about it, they are the most militant people that you hear. Like if somebody who has strong opinions coming out and talk. So the fact that you reached out to them, and this is why I'm saying it's amazing and commendable that you actually built trust and have a
I
bridge
mean,
open.
I appreciate that you said that. I promise I did not do this to try to build trust. I did this because as a mother, I think it's the right thing to do. Like you see people dying that maybe are related to people you know. I mean, in our culture, it's actually very, I will say this thing about the Palestinian culture. Like when we have a funeral, we overcompensate in terms of outreach. So when somebody passes away, even if I've never met them, if my mom has met their uncle once, we are all going to that funeral. I remember growing up as a kid, I'd be like, I don't even know these people, Mom. Why do I have to go to this funeral? And what am I going to say? And she's like, we are showing up because it's better to have a massive funeral with 1,000 people there than a wedding with 1,000 people.
Oh,
Like
that's
that's
what
more important to us.
that's all the Middle East.
Yes. Yes,
Listen,
exactly.
we're Egyptians. We built cities for the dead. So that's you got way more work to do to catch up. But sorry, continue. Sorry.
We have to have fun. We have to try to find, sorry, not fun. We have to try to be humans, I think, at the end of the day.
Our culture is more than death and destruction
Of
and
course. No, of
victims.
course.
Our
We
culture,
want
our
life.
culture has beautiful dresses,
Yes.
amazing food, wonderful music, literature and art and poetry. And for anyone who's listening, Palestinians are hold some of the richest traditions of the Middle East, and the Middle East holds some of the richest traditions of the world. And
Yes.
um, and and there is way more. Like the reason we're having this conversation is because we are not just refugees. We are not just militants. We are not just angry mob shouting in the street, covering their faces. We are like there is a lot that people should know and learn about Palestinians in Canada and in Palestine.
I hear you. So we love life. At the same time, our culture is very adept at dealing with death when it comes to collective actions because we are forced to deal with so much death. So we
Of
know what
course.
to do when somebody dies. And so yeah, that's I guess that's why and yeah, I think this November it was the first time in my life that any of my Jewish friends reached out to me because of what was happening in Gaza. And I thought, whoa, what? Why? Like, I almost had, yeah, a similar experience of like, wait, so you know what's happening? Because I never thought anybody knew what was happening in Gaza. Like, we just assume people don't know. And I think that's why people are so loud on the internet because they don't know. And I think as soon as I knew that actually the public did know about the Nakba, they do know what's happening in Gaza, that kind of calmed my fight or flight response in terms of like calling my MP every day. And it allowed me to think a little bit differently in terms of, okay, how can I now be additive to asking and fighting for equal human rights and equal safety and equal freedom for everybody that lives in the Holy Land? And how can I be additive? And I think the way that I have been additive is just having as many questions and dialogue as possible with people that have markedly different perceived political ideologies and different identities from me. I don't seek people out to debate them. This is not something I decided to do. Like I have a day job, but I think in just reaching out to people and saying, I'm sorry about October 7th. I'm sorry about this. Are you okay? What can I do to be there for you? It just opened conversations with people that I already had in my life that finally for the first time we're talking about it together where it used to be a taboo subject. And I can tell you, Ahmed, that it has been so healing because we've been doing months of this dialogue together and months of dialogue with people that I know their politics are markedly different from mine, but our kids go to the same whatever together, and they're at birthday parties together. So we're still in each other's lives. But it has been so healing. It has been a two-way healing experience. It really has been a two-way healing experience.
So once you felt that there was people in the Jewish community who acknowledged your pain, that gave you the freedom, I guess, to acknowledge their pain as well. And I think it's a liberating experience. I think this has been my experience as well, to be honest. The fact that I'm surrounded by good friends, which we worked together for a long time, and we built that trust. And seeing them verifying the trauma that I was witnessing, that I was feeling, liberated me from the anger, and it made me focus on the pain. And it allowed me to share their pain as well. And it allowed me to have good conversation. And I think, I mean, I am so glad that you're here. I'm glad to hear from you, your experience, because everyone is very quick to publish the angry story and the angry attacks. And people who talk to each other, and the numbers are increasing. I mean, every day there are more people I see, and there are more initiatives. I think people like you and your friends and your Jewish colleagues are the people who are going to take us forward, because the angry people cannot take us forward. They have been failing miserably for the last 75 years.
You know what? I hear you. I appreciate what you're saying. And I'm going to add to what you're saying and say, I actually believe even people that are angry are also going to find futures together. And I say that because in times in my life previously when I have been so hurt that I remember feeling how people feel very much. Of course, we feel this way all the time. It felt offensive and insulting to me when somebody would say, like, this is not the way. Even in talking to MPs, they would say, like, I would say, can we please have like a ceasefire agreement, return all the hostages, bilateral agreement. But even the word ceasefire caused them to be like, oh, I associate you with this tribe. And they would almost like shame me and make me feel like condescending, like, well, you know, we don't bring that to Canada. And I would say, instead of, I think, shaming people, we should accept people for where they are at.
So you're understanding the anger, and you think the anger. That's a better approach than mine. Thank you for saying that too.
I wouldn't say it's better. I would just say it's my approach, because I think in order for us to demand equal freedoms for all Palestinians and Israelis, demand equal security and safety for all Israelis and Palestinians, demand freedom of mobility, human rights, civil liberties, happiness for Palestinians and Israelis. Like, everyone will come forward, and everyone actually wants the same thing. We all agree on the what. We disagree on the how.
I fully agree with you.
Disagree on the how. So I actually think that 90% of people have the exact same agreement, but we are not hearing them. They're at their desk jobs, and they're unsure on the how we will get there.
Listen, I walked in some of the protests,
yes,
and I did not like some of the chants. But I was talking to my wife, and I said, you know what? I bet everyone here, if we had a discussion about how to modify the chant and how to change it, if we are not under emotional stress, I can definitely get a majority vote on my suggestion.
Yes.
But
what
but we are under
bothered
emotional
you?
stress.
What was it?
Like something like, you know, when we say, like, one of the things that I am not a big fan of is if we say I'll tell you what, like, let's say from the river to the sea, like, that's one of these things, right? It is not. I'm sorry, my dog decided she wants to be here.
Bring her. She's part of the discussion.
She wanted to be here.
She's very important.
When we say something like from the river to the sea,
yes,
and we totally ignore what that means to someone else,
yes,
we are saying effectively that we don't care about the other opinion. And I don't like that part. And I always tell people, you know what? It should be from the river to the sea, Palestinians should be free.
yes.
And that is true. And I think Palestinians and Jewish people, because Jewish people seems to be effectively free, with with, of course, the limitations of the violence. But the Palestinians are definitely way more constricted, way more under occupation, way more under military control. So I disagree. But then, like I said, I understand, like you said, the special circumstance we're in under pressure. This conversation can go on for 2, 3 more hours, but we're limited. Yafa, I am so delighted that we talked. I am proud to know people like you, and if you're listening, there is a lot more like Yafa. There are many others than Yafa that are like Yafa. It is just tricky for me to get them in the podcast. Tricky for me to allow them to use their names and their faces. Yafa has been extraordinarily brave, and I'm really
No,
grateful.
no, I'm not. Honestly, the people living on the land are the bravest ones. I really appreciate you having me here, but can I leave with one expression?
Of course.
This is going to be very controversial, but we have this expression in Arabic that my mom always reminds me. And she said, give the baker half your dough, even if you give him up half your dough, so that you get bread. And what this means is back in the day, before people could afford ovens in their house, there was a district oven where you would take your raw dough to the guy with a big oven and he could bake your dough. But the charge for baking dough into bread so that you could eat bread was he would take half your bread and he would sell that bread. So like the kind of the barter system, we see this also in olive oil production too. And in my life, there have been so many areas where I think it's almost like just accept, like compromise on half so that you have bread. Otherwise you will just have raw dough. And this is just an expression I would like to put out there. Take from it what you would like to interpret, but that's what I would like to leave with. So thank you so much, Ahmed, for having me. I very much appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, Yafa. Like I said earlier, we don't choose our history, we choose how to deal with them. I will tell you right now, we don't choose the current events that happens around us, that happen around us, but we choose how to deal with them. And your choices of dealing with the events by communicating and building bridges, finding common language, focusing on the pain and the trauma of the people of Palestine, of Gaza, and the West Bank, which is almost seems to be forgotten in the current situation, and the injustice, while not losing your humanity and keeping your moral system intact, is admirable. And I am delighted to talk to anyone like you anytime.
Thank you, Ahmed.